Marvel's Spider-Man 2 comes out in October, and along with it, some prospects of a new Advanced Suit Hot Toys figure. Should you wait for that new version or get this one in the meantime? Let's find out. Much like Insomniac remastering their original game for the PlayStation 5, I am now remastering one of my own reviews. If you guys have been here since the creation of the channel back in September 2021, you know that technically I have already reviewed this particular Advanced Suit Spider-Man figure from Hot Toys, but seeing as that I have a brand new light setup with the light box here, and now there's a bit of a resurgence in hype around Spider-Man 2 due to that recent PlayStation showcase, I figured, you know what, let's jump back onto that hype train and look back at this original Hot Toys figure of the Advanced Suit Spider-Man and give it a second look, a revamp, a remaster of my own, if you will. Plus, a review in this style of format with the light box and everything will also pair very well when we finally tackle the Miles Morales Hot Toys figure that I have yet to review on the channel at all. So, it's a good little capper. And to start things off, just a quick look at the box. They have, of course, the standard template that I've mentioned before, where you have Spider-Man swinging with the Advanced Suit, the logo, the red, of course, the pattern design on the back with the logos and little images of the game, whether it be landmarks or in-game models of Spidey. 1/6 scale on the side right there. This is also part of the Video Game Masterpiece series, so they follow this same kind of style when it comes to organizing the different elements on the cover. So you have Spidey over here, 1/6 scale in the corner, the logo of the game, and you'll notice that this isn't exactly the only game Hot Toys figure that they do this with an awful lot. The Arkham games are also kind of guilty of following this exact template. So there's a sense of uniformity, but at the same time, there's times where I do wish that Hot Toys would be, would take a chance, at least a little bit more on some of their packaging. Nevertheless, the premium quality is still found there via this flap that is held by magnets. So when you move it off to the side, that has the images, the glossy images of Spidey in game, you will then see another white symbol logo right here, as well as the stencil that reads Spider-Man Advanced Suit, 1/6 scale figure, VGM031. Opening the flap will then greet you to the quote-unquote cast and crew of the Hot Toys that designed the figure, along with some artwork there behind it, and then the window design that we've seen before Hot Toys tackle, only this time, of course, it's giving us a peek at the Advanced Suit Spidey inside. Moving towards the back, of course, you're going to have all your legal stuff and your credits and things like that. Once again, that white symbol on the sides, and then, of course, the Spider-Man logo from Insomniac on the top and bottom. And that really about does it for the packaging. Again, pretty premium in terms of feel, in terms of the quality of plastic that's holding everything together, but I still wish that they would do something a little different when it comes to this template. Upon opening the box, Spidey's going to be surrounded by all of his accessories, half of which are his hands, and much like I'm trying to do with a lot of my Hot Toys reviews, I'm going to tackle a few of those first before we get to the webhead himself. He comes with, of course, fisted hands, so those are going to be pretty much default with any Spidey figure, so there they are right there, pretty durable and very well painted as far as the Hot Toys quality you come to expect. Of course, being Spidey, he's going to come with these open, slightly wall-crawling looking hands right there, and they are also sculpted very well in, especially with a little circular base or circular disc there in the middle of his palm for his web shooter, so that's a nice little detail they decided to incorporate. And then it wouldn't be Spidey without his web shooting hands. So those are the three natural pairs you've come to expect from any Spidey figure, and Hot Toys did not spare any expense on that. Aside from that, you're going to have your little offshoots that you typically don't expect with Spidey, but with Insomniac Spidey, they are in fact going to be the case. One of which is, of course, the peace sign, bunny ears gesture here on the right hand, which for other figures may not be entirely in character, but for Spidey, especially the Insomniac Spidey with the photo mode, it definitely is, because now you can pose him in that selfie manner that he has from the iconic game, and now the Hot Toys figure is able to replicate that pose, so that's pretty cool that this gesture allows you to do that. The other one is actually another one that is pretty staple for Spidey, but they decided to only have it on the left hand, which is going to be this web strand holding hand, so he does have a cutout in the middle where you could throw in one of the web strands that we'll tackle momentarily, but he only has it on the left, so I kind of wish that they would have included a pair with this one, to be quite frank. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have these two hands right here, one for the left and one for the right, that are technically holding hands, but they're very specific holding hands. One of them is more of a hand holding gesture where two of his fingers are clenched in, but then the other two are extended to hold some of his gadgets that are a little bit on the unorthodox side and smaller side, so they're able to fit in a little bit more favorably in this hand versus the other one, which is still sculpted in a way that's designed to hold a specific item, but this time he has all 5 of his digits extended and in a circular format, so he's able to hold one of those accessories that, again, we'll cover a little later on. But it's cool to see that they also threw that in. But you've guessed it, one pair is missing, and that's going to be the default relaxed hands that are actually already attached to the figure itself. And here you have the man of the hour, the amazing Spider-Man. Oh, I love Bruce Campbell. Anyways, the advanced suit Spider-Man from the PlayStation 4, or I guess now you can consider the PlayStation 5 Insomniac game. And this is, I guess we need to really clarify by this point that this is the suit from the first game, because the second game is going to be using a different suit with a couple of alterations, but for the most part, it's going to look pretty similar. I just needed to put that out there as a disclaimer because it's very easy to kind of blend the two together, but there are distinguishable differences, and I'm looking forward to seeing if Hot Toys is going to extrapolate on those differences to bring us a new Hot Toys figure. Not to say that it's 100% needed, because as you can see right here, this guy is actually delivering an awful lot on the presence value, on the sculpting, on the body proportions. They really nailed it with the body. Because even though it's a little easy to admit that there's a very good likelihood that Hot Toys utilized a body that they've used before in some other Hot Toys figures, predominantly Spidey's, there is an added level of sculpting happening with the suit to give it a much more distinct look to that of the Insomniac interpretation, as far as, like I said, the proportions, the height, he is to scale, and you see an awful lot of the details amongst the texture of the suit and the way that it was designed by Insomniac to really make it pop and come to life. One of the things that I greatly appreciate is that the actual fabric of the suit is really great feeling. It's an entire body suit that's stitched perfectly together. There's barely any seams, and whenever there are seams, to me at least, they appear in areas where it makes sense for the seams to appear on a body suit, especially if it's going to be that of Spidey's, where you have a little bit of a crotch piece happening here amongst the buttocks that kind of starts to stitch along the sides, the inside seams right here of the thighs, and then when you have a little bit of the area underneath the armpits, you see that it kind of connects right about right there around the rim of the shoulder. So areas like that, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how someone, at least in the cosplay community, would put together an advanced suit, and it looks like they replicated that fairly well here in Hot Toys format. And the other area that stands apart is that the texturized areas of the suit that are very faithful to the source material come through very well in hand as well. Mainly the red areas that have kind of like this textured grip feel on the surface versus the texture grip that you feel on the blue. You know, you have a felt type of fabric happening alongside those pieces, but they feel very much distinguishable from each other. And amongst that, you have pretty much every section that is covered in that white glossy finish being sculpted in a way that feels very puffed up, but also very good in quality in hand. Of course, the standouts to me in that feature would have to be the white symbols on the back and the front. They feel very good in hand. They're kind of made out of this like fabric rubber. I don't know what to call it necessarily, but it's almost borderlining on that of spandex, especially the rest of the suit. The rest of the suit almost feels like spandex. Now, of course, that's going to come with a caveat, and the caveat is one that you probably already heard time and time again, not just with this Spidey figure, but almost any Spidey figure that Hot Toys has made up until this point, is that it could be subject to creasing depending on how you pose them. We'll tackle that more when we get to articulation, but for the most part, the suit really manages to hold its own, and when it isn't there, it's still sculpted very beautifully, especially with, like I mentioned before, those relaxed hands that you have here that are pretty much their own separate pieces. They're not covered by any fabric at all. The little I don't know what to call them, but the little guards you have here on the sides of the shoes are sculpted out of this plastic that wrap around the ankle as well as the soles and toes of the feet, but at least they make sense for them to be there. Again, it's within the context of the suit that really makes it pop and happen and feel very lifelike. And then, of course, there is the head, which is not covered in any form of fabric. It is, in fact, its own separate piece that is pretty much a very durable molded plastic, but the way that they were able to sculpt out the little ridges in between each web lining, as well as the Oakley glasses, right? Well, at least they kind of resemble Oakley glasses, but they are meticulously painted and sculpted and blended in, especially with that kind of eggshell design to the white inside of the lenses that doesn't look like a flat white. There's almost like a little bit of a shade and reflection happening there, especially when you move the sculpt amongst the lights. You can see an awful lot of that coming through, and it's very quality, very premium. But like I said, just be careful when it comes to creasing and moving the figure as far as how this suit just kind of holds its own together, because here we are almost 5, or if we are to be fair, 4 years, because I believe this came out a year after the game, so we're talking more so 2019 or so. But you can see right here, as long as you maintain it and treat it very carefully, it's still pretty much in top quality condition all these years later. And it looks like that's just a testament to the way that they were able to at least get it right with the advanced suit this time around. That is, of course, unless you're bothered by one particular inaccuracy that I'm actually not bothered by at all, because I thought it was a little weird seeing it in game, especially when you're swapping between suits in the in-game menu and you notice this. And I'm like, why does it look like that? Even though as you kind of swing around the city, it looks a little bit better. And that has to be the red hue, because in game he looks a bit orangey. I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but he just looks a little orangey in in-game menus and in certain cutscenes. Not all of them, but in certain cutscenes throughout the game, whether it be with the contextual lighting going on or just from a particular camera angle, the red on the suit looks a little too orange. Frankly, it looks like Hot Toys muted the color down, at least both the blue and the red mainly, and you could see that the blue pretty much looks one-on-one identical to that of the suit in the game, but the red is actually the one that's a little bit more muted and hot rod red looking. And personally, to me, I actually kind of like that a little better than it does in the game. So this is a slight inaccuracy that I personally really enjoy, and it looks a little bit better, especially here up on the shelf in Hot Toys form. But if that does bother you, just take that into account. And then, of course, as long as you're not bothered by the creasing that happens with the articulation, then you're going to be just fine with this figure. Speaking of which, let's tackle the actual points that you're able to maneuver when posing this figure, which are definitely going to be very important, because this is, after all, Spidey. He needs to have a very agile physique and agile posability to fit the character. Thankfully, because of the head being a separate piece that's not controlled by any kind of fabric or design with the suit, you are able to rotate the head pretty much a full 360 on its swivel, as well as being able to tilt it pretty much almost all the way up, really. It's actually pretty favorable in that sense. And then kind of nudging itself forward on the hinge of the joint, you are able to bend the head almost all the way into the body like so, and slight tilting left to right. So it's actually a pretty fluid and very posable head joint that you have right there. Then we get to the arms, where a point of contention is slightly raised due to the way that the suit is built around the body. Because even though I love the way that the suit is designed in terms of fabric, in terms of quality, and before I even forget to mention the musculature that they managed to embed into the suit itself via the pecs, the muscles on the shoulders, the joints, specifically this entire top area, it does kind of limit a little bit of the posability. You can see right here that via a ratcheted joint, you are able to extend it pretty firmly and pretty generously towards the sides of the body, but you then get your creasing that I mentioned time and time again happening right below the musculature. Hell, not only the fabric creases, but even the musculature piece right here on the very top starts to bend into itself and kind of ruins a little bit of the illusion. So that is a little issue that needs to be brought up. When it comes to rotation, you're pretty much null and void, because he can only extend the arm front towards the front here, only about that far right there. And like I said, I don't want to really press my luck with the suit, because even though it's been holding its own weight in terms of stitching, I really don't want to press my luck. Same thing goes for pressing the arm towards the back. You can see right there that it pretty much kind of restricts itself to only about that far. And then there's a little bit of bicep swiveling happening inside of that shoulder area, but because of the way that the suit is designed, you can only really go so far. The elbows are able to bend almost all the way inwards beyond the 90-degree angle, but only about that far in before, again, the creasing starts to happen alongside the bicep right about right there. Thanks to the wrist joints, however, you are able to rotate the hand 360 in place, as well as being able to slightly incline the hands inwards and outwards, but the joint is a little limited due to a bit of an accessory feature happening with the web shooters, which we'll tackle a little later. Torso. Yeah, about that. Again, the suit is going to come in the way a little bit, even though it's really well sculpted with the chest padding as well as a little bit of the abs happening right there in the middle. You can actually feel the abs as far as the sculpting and the padding they managed to include in there to give it that quality. It is going to come in the way of the articulation because swishing the waist as well as the mid-torso side to side, there is a joint there and you are able to get some movement, but you're going to start to wear and tear the suit a little bit. So honestly, I wouldn't really press my luck. A little bit of inclining and crunching happening on the obliques as well as the inside part of the torso. So if you want to put them in some poses, there is a joint there and it is able to allow some mobility, but the suit is going to be a caveat there where you come into contact with it and there's something happening alongside right there. So there is mobility. It's not like it's completely gone, but you just have to take that suit into account. Same thing for the top legs where you have another ratcheted joint that feels very good in hand and it's also very clicky, but it never feels too forced, too firm, or too loose. So you are able to move the legs only about, I want to say about that far before you start to get a little bit of resistance or creasing in the suit. A little bit towards the back, about that far actually, so it's pretty generous. And then of course you're going to have the clickety-clack ratchet to be able to extend the legs about that far before you see a little bit of stretching happening alongside the seam right here, so do be careful with that. Two joints at the knee that are actually pretty generous, a little bit better than that of the elbows that are able to bend all the way up towards that angle right about right there. In my opinion, pretty good for a Hot Toys figure, if I do say so myself. And then you do have the joints inside of the ankles that do allow the foot to be able to pivot upwards about that far and then downwards slightly before the piece of plastic that makes up the shoe kind of comes into play right there. And it's a good thing that it does because if you look a little careful, sadly, the ankle joint, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the way that it's constructed inside of the body, but it starts to protrude outside of the suit a little right there. It almost makes it look like his ankle is completely broken. A little grotesque, if I do say so myself. So do be careful with that when extending the foot downwards. But unlike some other Hot Toys, this guy actually does come with toesies. They're not the most articulated ones, but they are found there and they do break apart from the plastic piece at the bottom of the shoe right here. So you are able to have some toes articulation happening right there. And it kind of makes sense, especially if you're going to be putting Spidey in a wall crawling position so that he looks more like he is fitting the position. He looks a little bit more natural. So even though I kind of came off as a bit of a negative Nancy when it comes to putting the suit an awful lot on blast for limiting some of the articulation, it's just the natural happenstance that tends to happen with a lot of Hot Toys Spidey figures. It just kind of comes with the territory. So taking all of those little things into account, there's still an awful lot of possibility to be found here, and possibility that favors the personality you'd expect from Insomniac's Spidey. And to see that you can still get an awful lot of gestures, an awful like I said, personality and moods coming from those poses with Insomniac Spidey here, that's a pretty good testament to Hot Toys, the way that they were able to sculpt out a body that, even though it feels a little familiar, again, they were able to incorporate some traits that give it its own kind of ambiance. And to even further push that forward, you have the remaining accessories beyond the hand accessories that you're able to swap out inside of the wrist joints that give it a little bit more life, as well as a variety of different poses that are very reminiscent of the game's version of Spidey. And one of those things is actually the hidden little feature that I've kind of foreshadowed a bit with the web shooters on his wrist. Upon swapping out the hands, you'll notice that you can actually remove the web shooters around his wrist joints, and Hot Toys decided to go ahead and throw in not just one pair, but 3 whole pairs of web shooters. So 6 web shooters in total. And even though on very first glance you can kind of see that they look very similar to each other, once you take a closer look, you'll notice that the nozzles themselves look very different from the 3 individual pairings. They're mainly designed to look like either the standard web shooters or the ones that are much more akin to the gadgets that he's able to use in the game. Sadly, I can't remember which one was which, but I do like that Hot Toys went the extra mile to design them in a very different way for all 3 pairs, and it's a nice little touch up on their part. Each of the web shooters also has a little cutout inside of the nozzle that allows you to attach the web accessories. Now, the webbings themselves are kind of par for the course when it comes to Hot Toys as far as web accessories that they throw in for a lot of Spidey figures. You have 2 medium-sized ones, 2 longer strands, and then 1 really long strand with an L shape at the end of it to kind of simulate a mid-swing kind of pose. The threading that wraps around them as well as the build quality inside of the plastic is pretty decent, but nothing to really write home about. Personally, for me, my favorites are the ones that are a little bit on the shorter side because of the little bulb at the end that's sculpted very well, and I like the color that they utilize to kind of give this opaque kind of shading to them. But my least favorite will have to be this cone-shaped spread out web effect that you can attach to either of the long strands at the far ends via this little hole that you can fit them in there. And I don't know what it is, but there's just something about this accessory that I've just seen so many times on so many different Hot Toys Spidey figures from different properties, games, movies, comic interpretations that I'm just like, all right, I'm kind of over this one. Let's change it up. But like I said before, web strands aren't the only things that are being shot out of these shooters. You have 2 web bombs that are very well detailed and painted, but to me personally, I don't know what it is, but there's something about them that look more like pumpkin bombs than they do web bombs. I don't know how exactly accurate they are to the in-game models, but what are more accurate are going to be these web trip mines that not only are very well sculpted and painted, but they also have a little magnet at the bottom. So in case you ever want to actually attach these trip mines to any magnetic surface, you can do so. And though they're not necessarily shot out of his shooters, you do have 2 spider signals that are thrown in. They're decently sculpted and painted on, but I don't know exactly why Hot Toys threw these in, because there's actually some in-game dialogue when you find one of the backpacks from Peter saying that this is actually a prototype that didn't exactly work out. So I'll take the extra little freebie as far as accessories are concerned, but contextually, they don't really make sense for them to be here. You could argue the same could be said for the Vulture Tracker, which is going to be this little yellow gadget that you can use on one of his hands to hold in place. And again, decently sculpted and modest paint applications added to it, especially that little touch of pink at the very top to kind of give it like this added variety kind of look. But overall, I just don't really have any particular use for it, especially since, like I said, in the game he doesn't even use it up against Vulture. It's more of a backpack goodie that you can find around the city. The next accessory is much more quintessential to Insomniac's Spidey, which is going to be his phone. Now, don't expect anything grandiose as far as touch-ups or little details, because it's frankly just a matted piece of plastic with a glossy screen and a little dollop in one of the corners to resemble that of a camera, but still, holding it in hand, he looks pretty cool having to use the phone for his escapades in this version of the game. And what's going to amplify the usage of the phone are going to be these extra lenses. You can swap out the default lenses he has on his head sculpt by simply just pushing one of the corners, removing it, and then attaching a secondary one via the magnet inside. And you have 3 different expressions. You have a neutral one, a very squinty action one, and then the open lens one. But I don't know what it is. I personally like to leave the open lens one on by default when it comes to displaying the figure, because I don't know what it is. There's just something about this expression that looks a bit more natural to me than what is labeled as the natural expression via the box. So it really depends on preference, but it's cool to see that these are also included. Accessories that also lastly include a spider drone, which is actually a lot bigger than I was expecting. And even though it does have some modest red chrome paint and sculpting going alongside the eyes and the webbing on top, and each leg is actually articulated so you can kind of move it about. The only thing I don't like is the actual quality of plastic. It's actually a little bit on the cheap side, very light, doesn't really have any kind of weight to it. But then Hot Toys redeems themselves with Spider Plushie! Yes, we get a spider plushie. They did not have to throw this little guy in, but they did. and he's just too cute. You know, you can't not be angry at Hot Toys for cheapening out on the Spider drone. If it meant that they were gonna throw in Spider plushie and posing him with Spidey is always a delight. Now, to pose Spidey, you actually have two options here. You have, of course, the archetypal Hot Toys base, which this time comes in a hexagonal shape with the Spider-Man logo from the game, as well as the white symbol, in front of what appears to be the patterns from his suit in blue, red, and white. And then in the middle of it, you'll, of course, have the bendy arm utilized as a flight stand so that you can pose him either standing or in some kind of web swinging or fighting pose in mid-air. So that's pretty cool that that is thrown in there, because typically they throw in the crotch grabber, but with a very vertical character like Spidey, you have to throw in the flight base. So it's cool to see that the bendy arm makes a comeback here, and it's very much in line with the character, and it makes sense for him to be included. Sadly, I can't say the same for the diorama piece that is thrown in. It might just be a personal thing, but I don't like these diorama displays. There's something kind of finicky about the cardboard utilized here for not only the diorama itself, which is mimicking that of New York City here, but also the other cardboard cutouts that are used to hold it up in place. There's just something strange and very Nintendo Labo feeling about this thing thrown together that there's a tiny little part of me that's kind of glad they don't really do it that much anymore. At least one really awesome thing came out of this diorama. If you look behind it, you'll notice that you have a plastic piece. And at first I didn't really know what it was up until I actually futzed with the end here to then pull this little grip out, and you could argue that my spider sense tipped me off. It is in fact a spider sense effect. So you can actually strap this to the back of his neck and you can give him a spider sense tingle effect. I think that's pretty awesome. And yeah, once again, Hot Toys kind of redeemed themselves. At the risk of repeating myself from that initial version of the review a couple years back, yeah, this is all in all a must-have for any fan of not just Spider-Man, but the Insomniac 2018 Spider-Man game. And if you're able to track down this original version, I would say he is worth the little quirks and qualms that I did have with the figure, whether it be the creasing of the suit or the varying degrees of accessories. But most of those varying degrees of feelings that I have for the accessories fall on preferences rather than objective problems. The suit itself, despite the creasing, still lends in favor of the physique and the body sculpt. That even if it is a repeat of a body sculpt they may have utilized before, the extra padding and the right proportions that we're able to nail for Insomniac's version of the character, along with the beautiful stitching and design work on the suit to give it that lifelike look of that original render, it's just all in all worth it. And frankly, despite my bias happening here, it is in fact one of my favorite Hot Toys figures in my collection, and I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. What I will have to leave up to you is whether or not you want to track this guy down secondhand despite being worth it, or now with the sequel on the horizon, perhaps Hot Toys has it in them to bring out a brand new reissue that's going to be having those little differences of that brand new render of the Insomniac Spider-Man suit, along with their brand new Miles Morales and possibly even a Venom. Can you imagine Hot Toys Venom from the Insomniac game? We'll just have to wait and see. But for now, if you guys do own this figure, let me know in the comments below. Do you guys love it, like it, dislike it? Do you prefer other versions? And if you don't have this figure, are you going to track it down secondhand? Or are you going to just wait to see if Hot Toys does in fact release a 2.0 of the Spider-Man 2 interpretation? Let me know your guys' insights in the comment section below. And of course, as always, if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button. Check out this other review showing up on screen right now for other awesome Batman, Spider-Man, and Hot Toys content. And until next time, guys, take care and stay humble.